Hey everybody, it's Charles from HumbleMechanic.com. Today, I'm taking your questions on radio problems, current draws, gauges, and more. This is episode 192 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, remember, in order to get a question on a show like this, email me, charles@humblemechanic.com. Put question for Charles in the subject, just like it says down here below. Ask your question right at the top, give me some space, and then give me the details. Also, if you don't see your question on a show like this, be sure to check out the quick videos playlist on YouTube. All right, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, and even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. Also, from May 8th to May 14th of 2017, I'm going to be running a sale on the Crew membership. The discount code is Humble5 right down here below. Put that in the coupon code. That'll save you $20 off your first year of Crew membership. That's where you can get exclusive content, discounts to places like Black Forest, Eurowise, Adams Polishes, Eastwood, S&P Automotive, MT Knives, and a whole bunch more, as well as the VW Audi training manuals that we build for our classes. So I'll be sure to put a link down in the description. Again, $20 off your first year of Crew membership. All right, with that wrapped up, let's get into the questions. First one comes from Peter. First off, congrats on making the leap to full-time humble mechanic. I made the jump from working in a shop to opening my own last year. While it's a lot of work, it's been very fulfilling. Thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. Also, whenever I read the name Peter, I always think, hey, Peter Man, if you know what movie that's from. Anyway, I acquired a 2001 Beetle for $200. Nice score, and it's got a big-time parasitic current draw. Fully charged battery won't start the car after it sits overnight. Do you have any common drains for these older Beetles? I seem to recall an older video you made a comment about Humble Mechanic being a resource for people to find quality repair shops for their cars. If that's your vision, I look forward to being a shop represented on your site. You're doing great stuff for the automotive industry. Thanks, Peter. So yeah, Peter, that is one of my visions, to have it be a resource where someone can type in the area that they're in and have shops and technicians so focused on the customer listed there that have been vetted by me and some other people that I know really, really well in the industry. It's an out there vision. It's not going to happen like tomorrow, but I will definitely put your email aside, and that'll be something you guys, I think you'll want to be out on the lookout for in the future. But to the main point of your question, 2011 Beetle parasitic current draw. So first of all, the best way to find the draw, check out the video I did on how to find a parasitic current draw. That'll walk you through step by step on what you need to do to isolate the circuit that's having the problem. So I'll link that up, probably up in the corner as well as down below. Check that out, watch that video. It'll give you a bunch of information on how to do that. On the 2011 Beetles, the most common things were the radio, the amplifier, the glove box light, the door lights, the overhead light. All those interior pieces were super, super common. The other one that I've seen a whole lot when it's not the radio or the lights is actually the alternator. Short inside the alternator causing the draw. I've seen that a lot of times. Usually disconnecting the small connector on the alternator makes the draw go away like that, like instantly go away. So you can check those things out as well. If you have an amp clamp or you want to disconnect the battery and hook it up in series, that's another decent way to do it. I did some testing with my Power Probe hook. That worked pretty darn well, better than I expected it to, so props to Power Probe for having a cool product that'll do that. And then just disconnect the amp, disconnect the radio, disconnect any of the lights. Usually with the lights, if you flick on them, they'll start to turn on because there's an intermittent short. But dude, killing a fully charged battery overnight is a huge, huge draw. So this should be really easy to find, like really easy to find, but start disconnecting that stuff. I know in the video, I talked about don't just disconnect things. It'll make the car mad and you can actually fix a problem temporarily and it'll just come back to haunt you. On that generation Beetle, pulling fuses and disconnecting components is not as big of a deal as it is on some of the more modern cars that are very heavily CAN bus driven. Most of the modules are kind of stupid and you can disconnect them and reconnect them or pull a fuse and plug it back in without too terribly much problem. So again, radio, amplifier, interior lights, alternators, and something plugged into the 12-volt outlet. That's another really common one too. Check that stuff and hopefully you'll just disconnect the radio and it'll all go away. Plug it back in, the draw comes back. Go back to the amplifier and disconnect that if it has one. See if the draw goes away then. All right, next one comes from Joe. Hey Charles, love the show. You taught me a lot. I have an '07 2.5 Jetta. I don't know the model of the radio, but I attached a picture. You guys can see it here. It's a radio with a 6-disc changer and sat radio. Anyway, my problem is the satellite radio function does not work. Everything else works. AM, FM, CD. Any ideas? I've been going crazy because when I bought the car, I was excited for sat radio and it doesn't work. Any info? And some people are saying that you should hear the advertisements, but Joe gets nothing. So Joe, on the '07s, this was actually super common. And this was back, I think, even when you could get XM or Sirius radio. The module is tucked up in the trunk underneath the parcel shelf. What you can try and do is go back there, disconnect it, turn the radio on and off a couple of times and reconnect it and see if that makes it happy again. But dude, odds are, in my experience anyway, with this generation car, the module is probably dead. We replaced a bunch of these modules for being dead, and really what we would do is we would go through the process, make sure it had power, ground, make sure a hard reboot of the radio wouldn't fix it. You can also do what's called a battery voodoo or capacitive discharge. That's where we disconnect both terminals of the battery. Both terminals of the battery are disconnected, and we take a jumper wire or simply touch the leads together while disconnected. Big warning, while disconnected. And do that for about 20 seconds, hook everything back up, and that gives it like a hard reboot of the car. Sometimes that will make the modules happy. Other times, not so much. But in my experience, most of the time, it's the modules actually just dead. Of course, you can check your fuses and make sure that you don't have a blown fuse. I would love to say, if you know someone else with a Jetta, pull it out and plug it in and see if theirs works, but that's a pain in the butt thing to do. You'd be better finding someone with a Passat of that vintage because it's not way up under the parcel shelf or the hat shelf. It's actually in the back trunk on the on the passenger side, just in front of where the taillight is. So there's not a whole lot more you can do, man. You can, if you got VAGCOM, you can try and talk to it. But if the module's dead, you won't be able to talk to it anyway. So do your basics, check power, check ground, disconnect it, turn the radio on and off a bunch of times. If that doesn't work, battery cables, do your battery voodoo, see if that works. From there, odds are you got a bad module. So I hate to tell you that, and you're probably going to be cheaper adding satellite radio onto the radio you have, or getting an aftermarket radio that has it built in, rather than messing around trying to replace that old OEM satellite radio. All right, next one didn't give me his name, so we're going to call him DG or her DG. Hey Charles, I'm a beginner in the automotive scene. I have some knowledge on fundamentals and different components, but zero mechanical experience. I'm doing an internship program at school where I go out to a small-time automotive shop and learn and help out. I just finished my first week of it. Each day I get about 4 hours there. Being a complete rookie, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing and don't know how to do anything. The other guys can help me sometimes, but aren't always there. Automotive is my passion, but so far the experience has been really stressed, angered, confused, and drained me. I'm sort of starting to lose my motivation, and I don't really look forward to it sometimes. Were you like this in the beginning of your career? If so, how long did it take before you gained confidence, and what advice do you have for me? Well, I'll be honest, in your first week, and you're already feeling like that, that makes me a little concerned. I remember my first week of anything, while I wasn't confident, I was excited. And even though I knew nothing, like guys, when I went to tech school, I knew very little about cars. Very, very, very little. That's why I think my experience at tech school was so positive versus what some people say is super negative and a waste of money. Mine was incredibly positive because I didn't know very much. I also worked my face off the entire time I was there to make every single second count. So the fact that you're feeling this discouragement is a little concerning to me. That being said, you're going to school, you're only there 4 hours, I get it. This is what you really need to look at. And I would actually, I'm looking for a piece of paper to write it down, but I would actually get a piece of paper and write down all the things that make you upset, frustrated, annoyed, mad. Write them all down and have them so you can actually look at it. Then I would write down all the things you love about cars, right? And I know this seems like second grade stuff, but trust me, this is going to help you out. Write it all down, and you're going to have to analyze what are the things that are making you frustrated and why. Is it your fault because you're inexperienced and you don't know? Okay, if you're frustrated because you don't know, spend some time learning, spend your off hours learning, spend your weekends learning, and make sure that you're capitalizing on the time there, because you will learn. You will learn one way or another. We also need to look at, is it because the shop you're in maybe isn't a great environment? And that's maybe what I'm wondering is playing a bigger role rather than you not being excited about it, is what does the shop look like? You're an apprentice, you're new, you're a rookie, you're an intern in your first week. You should pretty much be like attached to the hip of one of the people there at the shop. I know if I had an intern that was in school 4 hours a day with me, for the most part, I wouldn't want them to leave my site because I don't want them to get hurt, I don't want them to screw something up, and I want them to learn what they're there to learn. So maybe the shop environment isn't the best. Maybe it's you, and maybe your passion for cars is not in the automotive world fixing cars. Maybe it's somewhere else. Guys, remember, you can be a car person and not a technician. You don't have to be a technician to be a car person, and you don't have to be a car person to be a technician. They're two separate things. I've known plenty of techs that couldn't care less at all about cars. So I would do those couple of things, and I would stick this internship out. I know it's frustrating. I know it's hard not knowing what you're doing, but the only way you're gonna know whether this is for you, or really more importantly, whether this is not for you, is to stick it out. Keep your head up. Remember, you're a week in. Not many people do anything and they're good at it in their first week. There's not one professional athlete that was ready to be a professional athlete in their first week of playing their sport. Zero. It was a lifetime of work, hustle, in order to get to the level they're at. It took me probably about a year and a half before, at the dealership, right? So this is about almost almost 3 full years of the automotive world. Plus I had sold cars before, so I'd been in it a little longer, before I could come in every single day and be confident and not nervous about what the day was gonna bring. Patience here is going to be your best asset. You don't need to know all this stuff tomorrow. You need to take your time. You need to understand what to do right and not just what to do to fix a car. Because what I see a lot of times is people looking for the quick answer. Charles, my car is broken. It's doing this. What do I replace? Well, I don't know. It could be like 15 things. Yeah. But what should I put on first? I'm like, well, why don't you spend some time diagnosing it so you only have to replace one part instead of 7 parts to get to the right answer. So keep your head up. I know it's frustrating. It sucks being the new guy, but the only way you're gonna ever be the top level guy is to get past that. And the other side of it, if you spend a month and you still hate it, it's time. It's time to move on, maybe a month and a half, 2 months, use your judgment. I can't be in the situation for you. At some point, you're gonna have to decide, this is for me and I love it, or this is not for me and I'm gonna go do something else, selling cars, building cars. Working on cars as a hobby and being a professional can be two very different worlds. So don't be discouraged about your love for cars if this doesn't work out, because this doesn't work out for a lot of people. And you know what? That's just fine. All right, wrapping up for the day is Matt. Hey, Charles, I got a couple questions I'd like to see if you can answer. Thanks for your time. I'm gonna answer one of Matt's questions. Matt, I'm working on the answer to your other one because I want to call an expert, from like whatever that pawn show was, bring in an expert and see what they actually say. So this one is, why does a fuel gauge read above full when the tank is full? I know it sounds trivial, but I'm so anal about it. We've perfected so many things in cars over time, so why can't manufacturers get this simple thing right? I've attached a photo to show what I'm talking about. So as you can see in Matt's picture, his fuel gauge reads past the little full indicator on his car. And I'll be honest, Matt, I don't know, right? I don't know the actual answer of why they couldn't make those two stupid lines line up. And I get it, right? I get it's not where it's supposed to be, so it's off. So, it catches your eye all the time. I totally understand. Here's my analysis of the situation and what we need to understand about gauges in modern cars. So 100 years ago, you'd never see this problem. But today, gauges function differently. Let's take a coolant temp sensor gauge, for example, because it's probably the easiest one to explain. So in your car, you have your coolant temp gauge, and you have all the way hot and all the way cold, and you have the needle that moves in between, and hopefully it never goes all the way to the hot. So what happens is our car warms up, the needle moves to the center position, whatever that temperature is. On a Volkswagen, it's 190 degrees Celsius is what's written on the gauge. Other cars may say something different, but it doesn't really matter. So we're looking at that. Sorry, I said 190 Celsius, I meant 190 Fahrenheit. But it gets there, right? And what do you find interesting about that? If the car's working fine, that gauge never comes off of 190. What we know about cars is the temperature is always changing. When we're stopped in traffic, the temperature goes up till our fans come on. Then the temperature goes back down. When we are using our air conditioning, it changes. When our thermostat opens, it changes. Yet that gauge never moves when it hits that spot. Why is that? The gauge has what's called a functioning range. So it could be between, if we use our 190, it could be between 180 and 200, and the gauge is still going to read dead center. So when we're looking at a gauge, we're not always looking at the exact temperature. We're looking at the fact that the gauge is telling us that there's nothing wrong or there's something wrong. So on a Volkswagen, if you ever see that gauge creep past 190, it doesn't have to go very far before you're looking at it like, this is really weird. And that's a problem. It should never go above 190 if there's not a problem. Of course, it'll drop below because, well, that's what happens when our car cools down. So that doesn't really describe why your gauge is reading a little more full than less full. And it's not like it's an analog gauge where you could just look this way a little bit or this way a little bit and it'll read fine, which I've done before. It's digital, so it just reads what it is. But I think the important thing to understand here is that gauges are there to alert you of a problem. They have an operating range where the gauge really won't move unless there is a problem. In fact, the only VW gauge I've ever seen be actually accurate is the voltage meter on Touaregs and Phaetons were incredibly accurate. Keep that in mind when we're looking at gauges, and I get it's frustrating. Maybe the dealership can go in with a scan tool and bump that back a little bit. I know VW on a lot of their gauges you could move that needle on the analog gauges to make it read a little happier for you. But on the digital ones, man, I'm not totally sure. I get that it's frustrating, but hey, the easy solution is just never fill your car all the way full and you'll be just fine. All right, guys, gonna wrap it up there. Questions, comments about today's show down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe and ding the bell on YouTube ding or over on the blog at humblemechanic.com. If you want exclusive content from me as well as discounts you can get nowhere else and VW Audi training manuals, remember I'm running a sale from May 8th to May 14th. Humble5, all lowercase letters, is the coupon code. Join for 20 bucks off on your first year of your membership. I really appreciate it. Make sure you hit that link and join, guys. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, Snapchat. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.